Mhm. Okay. Shalom, 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 everybody. How y'all doing this morning, man? Hope everybody's doing good, man. I've been trying to go live for a couple of days, so we're gonna see how this works, how this thing works this morning. We're gonna see how it works. I really didn't want to do this. So we're here with the welcome back to the next session of reading with Shilo, man. Shilo. We're here with the conflict resolution playbook by Mr. Jeremy Pollack, man, which we have been moving through. We are definitely over halfway through the book. We're on chapter 14, man. Collaborating on a solution. We will be reading chapter 14, 15, and 16 today. As long as YouTube holds up, we'll get it out the way. As we move closer to the end of the book, so far I think it's some good stuff in there. Some good things. Good things in conflict resolution. If you listen to the previous book, The Art of Conversation, some of the things that was talked about in Art of Conversation are reiterated in the conflict resolution playbook, especially like active listening. That's one. Showing empathy is another. Having empathy. The asking of questions for clarity, both within the art of conversation and the conflict resolution playbook. So both things that can be added if they're not being used already. That's about it. Let's get started. We're going to see how it works out today. Chapter 14 of the Conflict Resolution Playbook by Jeremy Pollack. Collaborating on a solution. Man, hold on before we do that. Let's see, get everything ready. Just in case we come across some definitions. All righty. Chapter 14. Collaborating on a solution. Malcolm and Darius have been close friends since college, which is surprising, given the two couldn't be more different, at least on paper. Malcolm was always a good student, the straight A valedictorian who went on to get his master's degree in education. Darius barely made it through college, opting instead to populate his social calendar with dates and parties. Regardless, the two connected on a level nobody else seemed to understand. They've always been able to count on each other to celebrate successes and commiserate over setbacks. In recent years, however, Darius's business had been booming, growing to more than 100 employees and raking in tens of millions of dollars in sales. Now, when the two check in with each other, the conversation tends to revolve around the pricey fruits of Darius's labor, the new car he's looking to buy, the next island he plans to vacation to, and so on. The conversations leave Malcolm, a high school English teacher, feeling like he doesn't really know the man his friend has become. And if he's being honest with himself, the whole thing is making him jealous. During one call, he even slammed the phone down in disgust. Although Malcolm misses his friend, he's not sure what this relationship is doing for him anymore. In truth, Darius is overcompensating for old insecurities, attempting to show his friend, whom he always considered smarter and more accomplished, that he's finally made it. Meanwhile, Malcolm is questioning his own career path. In turn, he is subconsciously blaming his friend's success for his own uncertainty and insecurities. Darius and Malcolm both need to trust that they care for each other rather than others' life choices, and will not shame each other tactically or explicitly for their choices. Instead of trying to fix Darius, Malcolm might invite him to discuss the problem itself, including what he notices, how it's affecting him, and what can be done about it. In this way, the two friends would be collaborating on a mutually agreeable situation, as opposed to attempting to solve each other. Strategy session. In times of conflict, it's natural to see the other person as the problem rather than as part of the solution. Let's see if we can reframe that dynamic. In the following exercise, you'll attempt to identify the problem as a third entity, granting you the opportunity to invite the other person into a collaborative effort to solve it. First, do your best to finish these sentences. The examples provided are from Malcolm's perspective. Behavior. The thing I don't trust or like about them is. Example. He talks about how much money he's making. Category. A category that defines the thing would be. Example. The topic of conversation. Feeling. That thing makes me feel. Example. Jealous and insecure. Affect. That feeling makes me want to. Example. Stop talking to him. Solution. If I teamed up with the other person to fix this thing, I would ask them, be as specific as possible. Example, talk less about his company and what he's buying and more about our families and my life. Now that you've identified what the thing is, let's invite the other person into a collaboration. Not identifying them as the problem, but rather talking about the problem as this third entity. This is a point you can reiterate throughout the conversation. It is not necessary to bring in how you feel unless it is a deeply personal relationship and it feels appropriate. Name. Would you be open to doing a little problem solving with me? I've been struggling with, insert the category. The problem is not you. It's just my interpretation when I notice, insert the behavior. When I see or hear that, I feel, insert the feeling. Are you aware that, insert the behavior? Do you think it would be possible to, insert the solution? Or do you have any other ideas as to what I can do to help address this? Malcolm's invitation might read like this. Darius, would you be open to doing a little problem solving with me? I've been struggling with the topic of our conversations lately. The problem isn't you. It's just my interpretation when I notice you talking about your company and how much money you're making. When I hear that, I honestly feel a little insecure. Are you aware that you do this? Listen, do you think it would be possible to focus a little less on the company and more on other topics for a while? Or do you have any other ideas as to what I can do to help address this? The point here is not necessarily to replicate the sequence verbatim. However, if you identify the key elements behavior, category, feeling, and solution you will be clearer on the elements creating the conflict and thus better prepared to resolve it. Keep in mind, when conflict arises, it's natural to view the other person as the problem. However, if you frame the problem as something independent of the relationship, you can create space for the other person to join you as part of the solution. In general, when you frame the conflict as opportunity for collaboration, this partnership or team mindset creates momentum and engenders feelings of alliance that are generally key to resolving conflict. It takes courage to confront someone and ask them to collaborate on the problem. It's much easier to avoid them or the situation. So ask yourself this question: is this relationship or the objective worth being brave for? Occasionally, you will run into someone who is almost undoubtedly the problem. Remember as best you can that they may be deeply entrenched in their own pain, insecurity, or fear, making it impossible for them to communicate any differently. Though compassion is warranted, it is not always possible to collaborate with every person on resolving a conflict. That was chapter 14, collaborating on a solution. Chapter 15, creative problem solving. Creative problem solving. Jesse and Jack have been married for almost a decade and have a 6-year-old son and a 4-year-old daughter. Jesse's parents, the Stanleys, treat the family to a week-long Christmas vacation each year at their timeshare in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. Jack's parents, the Aronsons, like to celebrate the first night of Hanukkah with the family to uphold tradition. The in-laws have always gotten along just fine. Some years, they all spend the first night of Hanukkah together. This year, however, there's a bit of a dilemma. The Stanley's timeshare week starts just before the first week of Hanukkah, or the first night of Hanukkah. The expectation is for the young family to head to Jackson Hole as planned, but that would take them away from for all of Hanukkah, which breaks the Aronsons' tradition. At first, none of the in-laws are worried. It should be an easy fix. The other in-laws will just adjust their schedule. Of course, these mutual assumptions don't come to fruition. And with the holidays approaching, animosity grows. Naturally, Jesse and Jack are stuck trying to please both sides. Doesn't Hanukkah last 8 days? Jesse's mom asked Jesse. Can't they just celebrate it a couple days earlier? It's not like Christmas. You're sure right. It's not like Christmas. We only get one day a year, and this 1 week a year for the timeshare. They're being ridiculous. This is the only week that we can take away. Jack's mom asked. This is the only week they can take you away. Jack's mom asked. Jack, can't they just do 5 days and let us have the first night of Hanukkah like we always do? They're being selfish. Neither side seems willing to compromise, and Jesse and Jack are getting fed up. They're thinking of just taking the kids somewhere else during the holidays and telling the in-laws that they'll get back to their annual traditions next holiday season. Each pair of the in-laws has a need for care and identity, manifested as a desire to celebrate their traditions and spend time with their families during the holidays. They also need to trust that the other couple considers and respects their needs. However, by doubling down on their positions in the family of the emerging conflict, they've established judgments about the other couple and missed the opportunity to come up with creative solutions to the problem. If they become flexible on their positions and focus instead on everyone's core needs and interests, they might be able to devise an original mutual agreeable solution. Excuse me. Strategy session. Each once each side knows the others understands and respects their needs, they can move into the solution mode. The solution may not be obvious at first sight. Man, I'm tripping right now. My bad. I am tripping. The solution may not be obvious at first, but once people stop concentrating on surface level positions and desires, a world of possibilities opens up. Let's try solution building with the previous scenario. Clarify needs and interests. Ask, what does each side specifically want? The Stanleys want to take their kids and grandkids away during their timeshare week. The Aaronsons want to spend the first night of Hanukkah with their kids and grandkids. Ask, why do they want it? Both sides want to spend time with their family during the holidays and honor their traditions. Ask, what core need or needs does this serve? Care, connection with family, and identity, honoring tradition. Let's see if we can brainstorm ideas that would meet those needs and interests. Brainstorming a 5-step process. Being open to brainstorming ideas is a sign of care for the other side. It shows your willingness to resolve the conflict and your commitment to considering ideas that can satisfy everyone's needs. Number one, idea phase. The idea phase. Brainstorming, a 5-step process. Number one, the 5 steps are: number one, the idea phase. Number two, the evaluation phase. Number three, the adjustment phase. Number four, the priority phase. Number five, the agreement phase. Number one, the idea phase. During the idea phase, write down all ideas without judgment, no matter how crazy they may sound. Be creative. Listen to all voices and record all ideas. Remember to not evaluate ideas yet. A portion on the Stanley Aronson idea phase may look like this. The Aronsons celebrate Hanukkah a couple of days before the first night or after the last night this year. The Stanleys invite the Aronsons with them to Jackson Hole. The Aronsons celebrate with their family through video chat such as Zoom or Skype while the family is in the timeshare. The Stanleys go away for only 5 days. Number two, evaluation phase. During the evaluation phase, all ideas are evaluated individually. If one side feels an idea may work but the other side doesn't, a discussion ensues about that idea. This is a great time to engage in reflective listening. What challenges does the object What challenges does the objecting side see? Excuse me. If the challenges are too great or the solutions won't work, that idea is crossed off. Eventually, only somewhat valuable options for all sides remain. The Stanley Aronson evaluation phase may yield the following ideas. The Stanleys invite the Aronsons with them to Jackson Hole. The Stanleys ask their timeshare cohort to shift their schedule so that they can start their timeshare week a couple of days later this year. Both families go somewhere entirely new and celebrate both holidays together. Number 3, adjustment phase. During the adjustment phase, all remaining ideas are discussed and adjusted as needed. Each idea is modified to make it possible and each minimally agreeable to both parties, considering their underlying interests and needs. How would each idea actually work if chosen as a solution? The Stanley Aronson adjustment phase may look like this. A. The Stanleys invite the Aronsons with them to Jackson Hole. The Aronsons find a nearby rental because the Stanleys' timeshare does not have room for one more couple. B. The Stanleys ask their timeshare cohort to shift their schedule so they can start their timeshare week a couple of days later this year. If it turns out they can only shift a couple of days earlier, then the Aronsons will celebrate the last night of Hanukkah together instead of the first. C. Both families go somewhere entirely new and celebrate both holidays together. The new place should be less than $200 per night per couple and within a reasonable distance of everyone's home. Number 4, priority phase. During the priority phase, the adjusted ideas are prioritized by desirability. Both sides make their own lists and then compare. Whichever 2 ideas match at the highest level will be the ones discussed for final selection. The Stanley Aronson priority phase may look like this. Stanley priorities A, C, B. Aronson priorities B, A, C. Well, they're going to what was read earlier. So the Stanleys they want to discuss the Aronsons coming with them, but getting a room for because their timeshare isn't big enough. That'll be the first thing. And then the second thing on Stanley's list is that they just both go somewhere different for the $200 a night and a reasonable distance. And the last thing on the list would be asking the timeshare to push it back a couple of days, but they can't. The first thing on the Aronson list would be for them to ask, which is the last thing that they want. The second thing on the list would be for they go with the Stanleys. And the last thing on the list would be that they both celebrate somewhere different. Number 5, agreement phase. During the agreement phase, both sides agree to select and implement the idea that works best for everyone. If the 2 sides are at odds, for example, one side's first choice is the other side's last choice, they may settle somewhere in the middle of their list. The Stanley Aronson agreement phase may look like this. Option A is the highest for both. Although it's not ideal for the Aronsons, they're willing to spend the money to be with their family during Hanukkah. Besides, it might be nice to do something different this year. This way, Everyone gets their needs met. Both couples get to spend time with their families during the holidays and celebrate their traditions on the days they prefer. Even if you don't go through all 5 steps, understanding the process can be helpful for creatively solving conflicts. Just remember to attend to everyone's underlying needs, be open to new ideas, and have a goal of inspiring solutions with which everyone can feel at least somewhat satisfied. Keep in mind, when developing creative solutions to conflicts, realize that each side is probably not going to get what they initially wanted. The goal is to get what each side needs. During the brainstorming session, it may be helpful to have a neutral facilitator or moderator, someone who will hold both sides' ideas in high esteem and guide the conversation during the evaluation phase. In this chapter scenario, Jesse and Jack could have been the moderators. Depending on the relationship between the conflicted sides, it may be helpful to run the idea phase of the brainstorming session individually. In other words, each side writes down their ideas on their own first. Then both sides evaluate together. Even if you do not, even if you do not, even if you do not get what you initially wanted, if you end up resolving the conflict with a mutual agreeable situation, can you gain satisfaction from knowing you preserved the relationship and served the other person as well as yourself? In addition to finding an agreeable solution, let it feel good to be humble and generous. That was chapter 15. Creating creative problem solving. And last one, chapter 16, devising a plan of action. Because after chapter 16, we'll be going into part 4, which is classic conflicts, specific strategies for universal problems. Now I'm trying to read a little slower. I'm trying to see if reading slower when it sucks. It sucks trying to read slower. I'm not sure how everybody hears it. I know how I hear it. Devising a plan of action, chapter 16. Maurice is a stellar technician. He can wire an entire office in one day and troubleshoot any bug in the system. However, he's not exactly personable, at least not with people who don't know him well. Coral hired Maurice a couple of years ago, but has recently decided to bring on a customer support person. She's realizing Maurice just doesn't have the skills to interact with clients on a daily basis. He mumbles or replies with sarcasm if he gets too nervous, which happens when he doesn't have an answer to a client's question. This comes across as unprofessional. Coral isn't sure Maurice understands how his words and tone make people feel. Maurice, Coral says one afternoon, gesturing for her employee to take a seat. You're a rock star technician. As I've told you before, you're incredibly valuable to this company. Thanks, Maurice. Thanks, Coral, Maurice replies. I know talking to clients and making sure their systems are running well is something you enjoy, which is great, Coral continues, because that's an important part of your job. What I'm beginning to notice, though, is that when you don't have an answer to a question, you tend to mumble or reply with sarcasm, and the whole meeting goes quiet. Of course, I know you, but the clients who don't, it may make them feel a bit awkward. Are you aware that you do this? Honestly, I don't realize I'm mumbling, Maurice says, but I can try to make sure that I don't do that. And yes, sometimes I can be sarcastic, but I don't think that it makes anyone uncomfortable. It can definitely stop making those types of I can definitely stop making those types of comments in client meetings. Okay, that would be great, Coral says, pushing back her chair. Thanks, Maurice. Coral is happy this conversation went well and without much pushback. She feels optimistic that until the next client meeting when Maurice interacts the same way. Though Coral can tell Maurice probably isn't cognizant of what he's doing, she is naturally frustrated, confused, and uncertain how to proceed. Maurice and Coral are on the same page. In fact, there doesn't seem to be a conflict between the two. Really, there's a conflict between Coral's needs as a business owner and Maurice's unconscious communication style. Both Coral and Maurice handle feedback professionally, but it's difficult to ensure changes occur. It's difficult to ensure change occurs, especially when it involves creating new habits, if there's no clear plan in place. Strategy session. You've gone through the necessary steps to de escalate and resolve a particular conflict. You've even decided on a mutually agreeable solution. However, the truth is that most conflicts aren't resolved with a one time solution. To maintain peace and diminish the chance for further conflict, you'll need to devise a clear plan of action. The following are four critical questions to answer for Maurice and Coral. Try using them when thinking through your own plan. What is the change you want to see? What is the change you want to see? Write down the intended behavioral change and outcome. Be specific. What exactly do you want to see modified? Intended behavior. Maurice will slow down his speech and stop mumbling. He will talk coherently and calmly. He will also stop being sarcastic. He will remain professional, friendly, and sincere. Excuse me. Intended outcome. Clients are happier. Maurice is more self aware and self confident. What role will each person play specifically? What role will each person play specifically? How exactly will you enact these behavioral changes and achieve the intended outcome? How exactly will you enact these behavioral changes and achieve the intended outcome? In other words, what role is each person playing in the change? Resolving conflict often requires effort on both people's parts. If behavioral change is only necessary from one person, then the other person's role will be to support that change in some way. Roles and goals should follow the SMART system. They should be specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and on a time frame. I like that. Roles and goals should follow the SMART system. They should be specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and on a time frame. Maurice's role. If Maurice hears a question that he can't answer, instead of trying to answer, he will ask the client to give him a reasonable time to find one. Coral's role. If Coral notices Maurice is growing nervous, that will be her cue to step into the conversation and take over. Maurice will recognize that if Coral does this, it's because of the mumbling or sarcasm. and he will make a note to himself at that moment that should help increase his self-awareness. How will you know if and when the outcome has been achieved? Shit can be different. Creating measurable goals and ways of holding each person accountable is necessary to achieve behavioral change during conflict. Sometimes, ways of measuring change are not initially clear. However, if we're talking about behavior, as opposed to a shift in attitude or perception, you can usually hold people accountable for having done or not having done something, as long as the problematic behavior is objective and conspicuous. That is, noticeable by more than one person. Here are Coral and Maurice's goals and accountability. I hear you, Big Daddy. I hear you. Here are Coral and Maurice's goals for and accountability. For the next month, Coral and Maurice will meet privately after every client meeting to debrief and discuss any issues that come up. If there was an incident during the meeting, Coral will ask to see Maurice's notes for the meeting to ensure he's practicing self-awareness. Coral will also have their new client support manager start implementing monthly client feedback forms to see if there is any improvement in customer satisfaction. What will you do if it doesn't work? What will you do if it doesn't work? If the solution isn't working, change it. The initial resolution to a conflict is not always the best one. Conflict resolution requires flexibility, which is why there should be a mechanism for feedback and adjustment. This will take creativity and collaboration. If you need help, call in a third party, like a trusted friend or colleague. Often, three brains, especially when one is on outside the conflict, are better than two at solving unique problems. Here is Coral's feedback and adjustment. Coral notices Maurice is still having trouble enacting the plan when he's asked questions he doesn't know how to answer. So they decide to try something new. From now on, they will include the company's new customer support manager in client meetings. Maurice will only jump in during the questions and answer portion when he knows the answers. Otherwise, he'll stay quiet. They will see how this new plan goes during the next month to gauge any improvement in the client satisfaction. The writerly advice. In the workplace, after a plan is formed, email it to all people involved so everyone has a clear written document for reference. When sending out a plan, ask everyone to carefully review it and respond either with an agreement or to address any discrepancies they notice. You might also try this in your personal and social life when appropriate. Keep in mind, measuring outcomes and upholding consequences for accountability in personal or romantic settings may not be as rigid or clear as in the workplace. Nonetheless, to resolve conflict and reestablish trust, boundaries, and relationship agreements must be either tactily, or explicitly understood. Incorporating a third party, such as a couples counselor, can add a layer of accountability. The last thing you want to do is to deepen the conflict or create new ones. If you or the other person can't agree on a plan, it may be time to pause the planning, do some solution-focused thinking on your own, and or engage in creative problem-solving process. Devising a plan of action is a practical way not only of resolving conflict, but also of effectively changing people's attitudes about the resolution and their futures in general. According to psychologist Mick Cooper's 2018 research review, a plan that includes clear goals and steps to attain them has been shown to increase hope towards positive futures. That was chapter 16. Devising a plan of action, which I think is definitely a good thing to do. I was trying to read slower, but it sucked. It sucked trying to read slower. I still was stumbling over words. 17, 18. Dealing with insubordination. Yeah, okay. We'll come back next time with 17, 18, and 19. That'll be it for this session, man. I'm glad that YouTube held up. I'm glad that YouTube held up. That was this reading session of the Conflict Resolution Playbook by Jeremy Pollack. Jeremy Pollack. Man, I think my reading was terrible. But hey, we pushed through it. We pushed through this session. I said I'm glad YouTube held up. I've been trying to go live for the last couple of nights, man, to try to get this part read, but I'm glad we got it out the way. I'll try to make today a 2 reading today, since we got this one out the way earlier. Come back later on today at some time. You know, we'll see. We'll see how the day progresses and what I have to work on today. We'll see. If I can fit it in, I will. It's been kind of cold. It might rain. And I think it's been raining. So I think there's some of the issue with my Wi-Fi. Like the cheap Wi-Fi. But hey, it is what it is, man. We'll rock with it. If everything holds up and I check back later and YouTube is working, man, we'll come back and we'll read 17, 18, and 19, which is the next part 4. Classic conflicts, specific strategies for universal problems. Now for the fun stuff, as if we weren't having fun already. The following chapters discuss common relational dynamics, interactions, and communication styles you've all likely experienced in moments of conflict. If any of these situations end up sweeping you out to sea, try using these strategies to get back to solid ground. Yeah, we'll see what they are. What can we learn and grow from in part 4? What have you? Is there anything that you learned and that you could use to learn and grow from in what we've read today in chapter 14, 15, and 16? Or in any other chapters, Leave a message, leave a comment, like, comment, subscribe, tell your people. Maybe the conflict resolution playbook is something that they, might need in their life, might want to hear. So share it. We'll keep pushing. I'm ready to get through this book so I can read the book I don't want to read. And we're almost there. We're almost there. I really hope that my unwant to read the next book will not cause me to read it in a way I don't want to read. Like I want my reading, even though I don't want to read it, I still want the reading to be good. You know, I want the reading to be good. And I think that's part of, I think me pushing myself to read this book I don't want to read is part of the art of conversation, being able to have the conversation. You know, and even though I don't even though I don't agree with it, it's just being able to read it to solidify why I don't agree with it, or why I don't want to read it, you know, or why I think what I think on it. And we'll come back next time. We'll finish this book, and I want to read the 5 love languages next. I'm gonna go ahead and get it out of the way before I read the big books. I guess, you know, I could read that in conjunction with the communication and the conflict resolution skills. I guess I'll go decently in conjunction with it. But I don't really want to read this book. But we'll read that and then we'll get on to I really want to read the little books. I'll get them out of the way before I read the big books. So we'll read that, the 5 love languages, and then I'm gonna read Why Women Deserve Less by Marvin Gaye. I'll read that because they're small. I think I can get through them pretty quickly, and then we'll devote some time to the books I really want to read, or I think. Let me not say I really want to read, but I think will be really interesting reads for me, and milestones for me. I would say there would be milestones for me as far as size. Um, as somebody, I think it was spiritual conversation that said a certain depth to the books, which is on the real side, which is what I'm ready to read. I want to read that. I think that's gonna be funny. I think it's gonna have some funny stuff, and I'm ready to see on the real side. So I got a plan, some goals. We're gonna stick with the goals. We're gonna stick with the plan of action. Try to devise a time period to get it done in. You know, and I think as long as I can keep reading on a daily, uh, at least a couple of chapters, you know, we can move through these books pretty fast. Have been moving through them pretty fast. Well, but yeah. Anyway, man, for those who come back and rewatch this on the back end, you know, I appreciate that. Like I say, leave a like, comment, some feedback on what you think. Even if you got, you know, some good book suggestions, leave feedback on that. Books that, like, if you know any books that, like, say they trying to ban books, certain books that they trying to ban that you might think might be good books to have before they ban the selling of them. Shit. I want to say if you got books you don't want. I want to say I'm going to set something up. I'll take them. Build my library up. There's so many books, man. You know, I think about that's why I want to read some books on. Stuff like the Library of Alexandria. You know, I've been interested in stuff like that. I can only imagine. You know, the books, you know. I wonder if Google would be considered like the Library of Alexandria today. But with all the information it has, or whatever. But anyway, till next time. Like I say, Shilo. Hope you enjoyed the reading of the Conflict Resolution Playbook by Jeremy Pollack. I was chapters 14 through 16, and we'll come back next time with chapters 17 through 19, man. I'm gonna cook some food. Shilo out. Shalom.